Hello and welcome to this very special webinar broadcast. So pleased and happy that you are here. And in today's presentation, we're going to be chatting about how to go about selling your story to Hollywood. And like every single presentation that we do, I always kind of like to start with a word from our sponsor, because in this training, we show essentially authors, speakers, and other folks that have stories, even nonfiction authors, how to take their stories and actually sell them to Hollywood. And my guest and business partner, Ken Atchity, have put together a course called Real Fast Hollywood Deal, which you're going to hear much more about at the end of today's training. But just so that you know, there is going to be a way for you to continue your training with us if that's something that you feel is a good fit for you. And you could check that out at realfasthollywooddeal.com/go, or most likely you'll see the details on that program immediately below this video. All right. So enough of the advert. Let's talk about what we promise in today's presentation. I like to start off every presentation with a promise so that you and I are on the same wavelength, on the same page with with your expectations. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you exactly what Hollywood studios and independent producers are looking for in the current environment, and why most books, most stories fail to sell to the entertainment industry. And we'll also talk about the sales document that it takes to sell your story, a little bit about how to write it, and how you could actually take your true story, your novel, your idea for a story, or even your children's book, and sell it to Hollywood or sell it to the entertainment industry. A bit about who we are. I wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Daniel Hall. I am an author, speaker, consultant, coach, and lawyer, as well as a nurse. Fortunately, I don't have to do any of those things to make my living, because today I am the publisher of a brand of products called Real Fast. They're in their training programs, probably designed for folks just like you, for authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, trainers, internet marketers. And in this particular training, we're going to be chatting about, as I say, selling your stories, however they actually are in existence for you. But enough about me. Let's talk about the star of the show here today. That's my friend and my business partner, Dr. Ken Atchity. And Dr. Atchity, he has a really sterling academic pedigree, as well as a sterling Hollywood pedigree, and I want to just briefly touch on this before I turn the reins over to him. He actually has his bachelor's degree from Georgetown University and went on to get his graduate degree in comparative language from Yale. So he actually has his PhD from Yale. He is a writer, producer, he's a creative developer, and literary manager and editor, and he has seen the story marketplace, the one that we're going to chat about in today's training, from all different angles, including the legal, the financial, and the psychological, which is a very important part of it as well. He also has lots of experience with dealing with agents and other managers, producers, stars, directors, financiers, studio execs, and attorneys. And importantly, from where you're sitting, he has the bona fides. He's produced over 30 films to date, and as a literary manager, his stories and his authors have actually had over 20 books on the New York Times bestseller list. So from the real world standpoint, he has a lot of very important credentials that I would argue are unmatched really in the industry. And not only does the real world recognize Ken as really the consummate professional when it comes to selling stories to the Hollywood marketplace, but he's actually in discussions with his alma mater at Georgetown University to help create a brand new master's program in literary management. So if you've never been on a training with Ken Atchity or myself before, all I could say is get ready, buckle up. It's going to be a lot of great, immediately useful content. So with that, I'm going to pass the virtual microphone and the floor over to you, Dr. Atchity. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for this glowing introduction, Daniel. I hope I can live up to it. That's the challenge of show business always. But it's a delight to be able to be here to help you understand how people sell stories to Hollywood. That's the goal, our goal today. And I want to start with some general things to say. Like, we're going to be talking about stories in the broadest way, meaning books and children's books and nonfiction books, novels that is, and as well as treatments and ideas for films, etc. So we're going to use story broadly, and we're going to also use the word Hollywood, even though those who have actually been out to Los Angeles know that Hollywood is not exactly a geographical place. It's more or less a state of mind, and what it really is around the world is a word that simply describes the entertainment industries. They've all changed in the last 5 years, so we'll be talking about that along the way as the studios have consolidated and producing fewer and fewer films every year. But the independent film movement, independent producers have exploded to compensate for the vacuum created by the studios. And now there are two film markets that are very vigorous, the studio market and the indie market. So at some point you may be a little confused about which one I'm talking about. I'll try to keep it clear. We're talking about film and television and in general all new media, from iPhones to the internet, all different ways of delivering stories to audiences. That's the thing that keeps all of this together. Those stories, as I mentioned, could be novels, nonfiction books, children's books, treatment, scripts, etc. And I also have to say that I love the brand that Daniel has created, the Real Fast Hollywood Deal, but don't let it confuse you into thinking that you can make it in Hollywood real fast. What I always like to say is, he became an overnight success in 20 years or less. So my goal with my clients and with you is to simply cut down on your learning curve. So it doesn't take you 10 years, but it might take you a couple of years. I think you can learn at least that much, 80% of learning the hard way you can get from our training. And this training is not based on my view of how things should be. It's not prescriptive. It's not based on rules. It's simply based on description of how things happen in Hollywood, how things work, how they tend to work. So never feel like if I can just do these 6 things or these 7 things, then I'll win. It's not like that. It's simply giving you my experience and hoping you can profit from it. So you have to start by recognizing that we're no longer living in so-called traditional times, and I wanted to constantly think outside the box because the boxes have actually been falling apart and breaking down for the last 5 to 10 years. So what's the point of thinking inside the box? And I've made films from all the kinds of stories I've mentioned. And I got into this business because a wonderful man inspired me by giving me the quote from William Goldman in his wonderful book, Adventures in the Screen Trade. Screenwriter William Goldman said, "Remember the only important rule in Hollywood, nobody knows anything." So I thought, okay, so level playing field, I'm there. Is breaking into Hollywood difficult? Yes. The hard part is the great part. So I want to start by telling you a metaphor that occurred to me when I was trying to explain for the umpteenth time how the whole thing works. Imagine a magical conveyor belt in the sky, and on this belt you will see, in the crude depiction here, all the screen projects from books to films to scripts that are moving up the belt toward that starburst moment, that stardust moment when they become films, that is when the shooting of the film begins. So what does it take to get to that moment? What does the script in front of the star have? And this is a quick list of it. That project has a perfected script that's been rewritten umpteen times and checked over many times, a finalized and bonded budget that a finance company called a completion bond company has signed off on, a start date for principal photography to begin, a location for principal photography, like a film that we're doing is about to start in New Zealand, a legal foundation, meaning that the 500 to 1,000 people that it takes to make your film all have contracts in hand and they're all signed, so we're ready to go legally. Of course, a director who's been enthusiastically developing the story the last part of the way and who's now ready on this start date to start shooting the film, and a committed cast that's ready for that start date as well, and an international sales agent who is going to sell this film as it's being made or when it's finished being made, and a domestic distributor at least interested. Domestic distributors include the big studios like Warner Brothers, Disney, Paramount, Sony, etc. So that's what it takes. And you can say, well, I'm going to get lucky and we're going to figure out how to get lucky. And then I'm going to not have to wait a long time for my movie to get made. The shortest film ever got made was a film called Joe Somebody that actually got a green light 3 months after we sold it to Fox 2000. But I don't like luck myself. I don't, if it happens to me, great. If it falls in my lap, that's great. What I like is work. I like hard work and things that are predictable. So this whole presentation really is about what to do if you're not lucky, because if you depend on luck, you have a completely chaotic and haphazard life. If instead you are laying the tracks like a craftsman, starting with measuring exactly how far apart they should be, because if you lay the tracks and you haven't done that, you went too fast and you're going to have a train wreck on your hands. But if you lay the tracks properly and build your train to fit on these tracks, then sooner or later it's going to get to the station as long as you keep driving it forward. And if it gets struck by lightning or the wind blows it along faster and some incredible luck happens to you, great, that's great. But you're going to make it either way. That's what all of this is based on, is let's make it either way. And to start out with, we're going to show you along the way why stories don't make it to the screen, why they fail. We talk about fast track like Joe Somebody versus a movie I made last year called Angels in the Snow with Christy Lawson in it. And Angels in the Snow took 20 years to get made. I sold it repeatedly to one studio after the other until finally we sold it and it got green lighted and got made into a movie. But my view is we're just going to continue down our track until the story gets made, and I want to show you how that happens. Most books aren't New York Times bestsellers, nor do they have incredible reviews in the New York Times or elsewhere. So they have to do it the hard way. Most books are written without even thinking about the requirements of drama. And I've always recommended in various classes that I've given that you should plan your book from the very beginning to be a film, like we did with my client Dennis Walsh's Nobody Walks, that's currently in negotiation with a major studio. We planned the book before he started writing it. And I said, Dennis, this is such a dramatic story. Let's make sure it has the characteristics of a film all the way through. What you're dealing with is the story department. That is the big antagonist to your hero's journey. That is the big giant killer. Stories get rejected by story departments. The story departments are run by story editors who spend their whole day and most of their nights reading scripts, reading books, reading treatments, and giving comments to their bosses. And upon those comments, which are called coverage, their bosses make decisions whether to consider the book further or simply to pass on it, as it's called in Hollywood. So the coverage is the secret weapon that the story department uses to evaluate and to make a decision about whether a book goes forward or whether a script goes forward or not. And the sad part about coverage, and we'll talk about this later, the sad part about it is that you, the writer, never see the coverage to your work. It's private, it belongs to the company, and they're not in the job of handing out criticism, solicited or otherwise. They're simply in the job of deciding whether to take your story on or whether not to take it on. So this is what you're up against. What they love is high concept, a term I'll keep coming back to, something that easily is pitchable. She's a fish out of water, a mermaid. That was the pitch for Splash. Anger management doesn't even need an explanation. You just hear, the title and you get it. Don't tell mom the babysitter's dead. The whole high concept is written in the title, and we'll see other examples as we go along. What if you learn all the things that story editors and story departments don't like, and discover that your book, the story you're trying to pitch to Hollywood, has some of these weaknesses to it? Well, here's what you do. You can redesign your story before you submit it to Hollywood. We're going to talk about how you do that. You simply redesign it and solve the problems. If your ending is weak, you put a strong ending when you redesign it. So how do you do it? You write a treatment. Whatever problems your book might display when it comes to making it a candidate for the screen, you remedy them in writing a good treatment. I wrote a book with Shalai Wong called Writing Treatments That Sell because so many writers need to learn how to write a treatment. Treatments are both diagnostic and marketing implements. They help you diagnose the weaknesses in your story, and they help you market your story. What is a treatment? Here's a definition that we'll be going through in the training. Relatively brief, loosely narrative, written pitch of a story intended for production, etc., etc. I always say, think of it as a letter, a passionate letter to your best friend about what happened when you came home last night and found your husband dancing naked in the middle of your living room with your best friend. You wouldn't have any problem. You wouldn't worry about therefore, moreover, however, or any of those other things. You would just blurt it all out with dialogue where appropriate, and your friend would get it and go, oh my God, I would have loved to see that. What a horrible scene, etc. So the two functions of treatment is to diagnose the story, helping you, the storyteller, identify what works, what doesn't work, without time and psychological investment of writing the actual screenplay, or even if you haven't written a novel yet, of writing the novel yet. It's a quick way to get your story straight. And it's also, and equally importantly, an essential marketing tool to show your story to potential buyers or allies in Hollywood in a way that indicates its film potential. It brings to bear, when you write your treatment, you bring to bear and remedy your story's faults from the list of bad news from the story department that we'll be going over in the actual training. So you think of this treatment as a passionate letter to your best friend. More examples of high concept: How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, says it all. Runaway Bride, if you've seen it, Julia Roberts, says it all. Saving Private Ryan, a band of soldiers goes behind enemy lines to save the last brother in an American family. Hollywood loves simple concepts that can be simply pitched. What filmmakers want in general to see in your concept and in your log line that we'll talk about in a minute and in your treatment is a universal presentation of human emotions like fear and love and hate and envy, of the deadly sins like greed, anger, lust, and major plot motivators, as they're called, like betrayal, vengeance, discovery, rebirth, survival. I mean, one of my favorite rebirth stories was Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone, about a retired mountain climber who had retired after killing someone in an accident and has to go back to the cliff to save an airline that's been downed on top of the cliff. So there's these rebirth and survival rolled into one story. And we love stories about loyalty and faith and responsibility. Movies like American Sniper, and there's just so many of them that win awards and that make us feel very good. So when you've got your treatment written and you've also figured out a one-line pitch, like we've given examples of, then you turn to the story marketplace and figure out how to take your story to that marketplace. But make sure you've really worked over your log line, or it's a one-line pitch. Sometimes they're called elevator pitches. The line you use on the phone to tell a best friend that he has to go see this movie, or the line you'd use anywhere in a grocery line or otherwise, just to tell somebody whose attention you have for 5 to 15 seconds why they have to go see this movie. So it's a one-line description of your story, very much like the one-liners you might read at the top of a Netflix listing. If you choose movies from those listings, then you are understanding the power of log lines, and you'll know how to write one for your own story. And by the way, if a story doesn't have a good log line and you can't think of one, that story is probably not a good candidate for movies. So your marketing array consists of this log line, your one-line pitch. He was left behind on Mars. He was raised among animals, but his biggest enemy is his own nature. And then you write a one-page pitch, which can be a long paragraph or just one page of a few paragraphs. That's the short version of the treatment, which is anywhere from 5 to 10 or more pages. Before you start sending out your stories, though, you protect your story by registering it with the Writers Guild of America West. The address is up here, wgaregistry.org. You don't have to be a member to register. It just is a fee, which I believe is $35 these days. And that way you have registered your story, and if someone should use your story incorrectly, you can prove that you registered it before you even send it out. And you're going to send it out hopefully by email, and you can find who to send it to on the internet quite easily. And of course in the training we'll get into more detail about that. But let's say you're an outsider, you live in Dallas, or you live in Tallahassee, or you live in Kissimmee, and you have no knowledge of anybody in Hollywood. You can still go to writers' conferences like the Austin Writers Conference, Pitch Fest, Scriptapalooza, and you'll discover that agents, literary managers, attorneys, studio execs appear at these conferences, and running into one of them can change your whole status as an outsider into being somebody who knows somebody in Hollywood. So be creative about how you approach the market. And what you put in a query, which is always by email these days, no snail mail, you put the log line first in bold, and you put maybe 2 lines about your professional background, writing or otherwise. If you don't have any other background, any writing background, then tell us you're an attorney. Tell us you're a stockbroker. Those things are interesting, but not more than 1 line of them, because you're writing an email to people who are getting hundreds of emails a day. And you're basically asking them, are you interested? You don't even have to say those words. They'll get it. This is a query. You query in the subject line with the title of your story after it, and then these 2 lines pitching it. If they're interesting, then don't add attachments, don't add your whole life story, don't add special pleas, don't add pictures of yourself. If they're interested, they will respond, and they'll ask you, what else do you have? And then you send them the next thing, which is your one-page pitch. And if they're interested in that, you then send them the treatment. Then they'll get down to, well, is there a script here or a novel? And you can get into a real conversation about a potential buyer because you've got his interest. Getting their interest is the first thing. And here's back to the coverage idea. What you're asking for from them when you submit your story, if you're asked to after the query phase, you're asking for a yes or no decision. No, they call it Hollywood, pass. In New York, in the world of publishing, they call it rejection, because I guess they're just much more Freudian in New York. But in Hollywood, everybody's much more cheerful, and they call it a pass because it might be an acceptance tomorrow. Yes means let's make a deal. It does happen sometimes that stories are decided on in the room. When James Cameron went in to pitch Terminator, he walked out of the room with a green light on the movie. It was one of the greatest pitches and greatest treatments ever offered. And then, if you're doing all this by email, it's going to go to that story department, and they're going to do a coverage on it. And that is the report from the story editor who actually reads the work and assesses its worthiness to be a film. You will never see it, but it's a crucial document to understand what goes into it. We'll be showing examples of that during the training. And the end of all of this process, hopefully, is to make a deal. That is the whole idea. It's not to be offered a deal, it's to make a deal. And I say that this way because a lot of writers, when they finally get a deal offer, negotiate it to death. They think that they're finally going to solve all of their starving artist problems, and they're going to make the best deal in the world. And your first deal is not going to be your best deal. It doesn't work that way in, in Hollywood or in any other walk of life that I know. Your deals will improve as you make more of them. So your whole idea here is to get into the ballpark. Once your foot is in there, you're in the place you want to go. And you will need a representative, if you don't already have one, or an attorney who will tell you what are the parameters, what's possible from a deal like that, what's standard. The Writers Guild of America has minimums and guidelines for all different sizes of movies. Don't demand the moon or any other planet. Just make a good, solid deal in the opinion of you and your attorney. When you get a deal, here's the way they usually work. They're called option purchase agreements. Somebody pays an option to you, and they range today from $1 to $100,000 or more, depending on the perceived value of your story, the underlying material, with the emphasis being on the low end if you and your story are not yet very visible. But that's the option price. It's the cost that they pay you that allows them to have the option to produce your movie for a given period of time, like 12 to 18 months. And at the end of that, you get a purchase price, which either comes at the end of the option or on the exercise of the option. Usually it comes on the day of principal photography. And that purchase price for underlying materials like stories averages between 1 to 2.5% of the film's budget, according to Writers Guild guidelines. And normally, as I mentioned, it's paid on the first day of photography. That's the general structure. There's some wrinkles in it. You get a participation in the back end. What I was talking about earlier is the front end compensation. Participation in the back end is known as contingent compensation, meaning your share of any profits that will trickle down to the producer. And that, of course, only happens when there are profits. In fact, so rare is it to actually receive that participation from a major studio that cynics in the business refer to the participation as monkey points. And often the studios have to be sued to get these monkey points, but they will settle out of court. They don't want you to look at their accounting, but they do want you to go away, so that's how you do it. You settle with them out of court. That's why you need a good attorney, because they know how to avoid that and how to deal with it all. And you'll get, as you close the deal, you'll make sure that your credits are right, that your name's at the front end, that based on a novel by you, inspired by a book by you, and in the training we'll walk through typical option purchase agreement. And this brings us to the question you're probably already asking, do I need an attorney? And the answer is yes, you do. The sooner you find a reliable attorney, keep him or her forever. A trusted attorney is invaluable, especially because you're going to need a professional to hold your hand as you go through the Hollywood learning curve. How do you find one? Best way is through referral from somebody in the business, and you can also find research by researching the internet and asking other attorneys who aren't entertainment attorneys to give you ideas about it. So now we go on to the day that this is all about, the day when someone says, tomorrow we go into production. These are the magic words you want to hear, and even after all the years I've been making films, I love hearing those words. I can't tell you. If you make it to the set of your own movie, be respectful there and just watch the professionals doing their thing as they turn your dream, your original dream, into a reality that people will watch on screens, hopefully around the world. Stay out of their way. It's better to be reserved and quiet and let them draw you out, which they will. Film crews are very serious, focused on their work at hand, but they're also naturally curious, and they want to find out who is this person on the set. So they'll draw you out if you see that you're respecting their work and doing your best to stay out of their way. A film set, if you've ever been on one, is a pretty chaotic place. I always liken it to a battlefield, and the soldiers on the field, you want to stay out of their way so they can do their job. But once you are there, they respect the fact that you're in this unique environment, and they want to know everything about you. So respect the village that's building your film. Don't act don't put on airs or act entitled. Simply be humble and gracious that your film's getting made. You're privileged to be there, where this village has taken on the task of building your movie. At the end of Avatar or a movie of that scope, you can sit there for literally 20 minutes watching the credits of 1,000 or more people that have been involved in making this film. That is a pretty humbling experience if you're a writer, and it was you at the beginning who started the whole thing off with your story. And I always say, watch how the professionals really act. I was on a set of one of my films, Life or Something Like It, one day, and saw that Angelina was hopping up and down on one leg, and I walked up to her and I said, she was alone watching the crew moving wires around. I said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And she goes, "I have to pee so bad I can't even tell you, but I don't want to hold things up." I said, "Well, that's ridiculous, Angelina. You have to go pee right now, then go. Just go. I'll take care of it." And she ran off happily to her dresser, to her trailer. And when she got back, of course, the crew was still fooling around with wires, but she looked a lot happier and more relieved. That's the way professionals act. They don't draw attention to themselves. They try to respect how complicated this whole thing is. People estimate that an hour of filming can cost from $10,000 up to $100,000, depending on the size of the film, because so many people are involved, so many things can go wrong. And the people who work in that business often are the ones who respect it and try to accommodate their own behavior to that of a very professional set of people making the film. And of course, when you get to your premiere, which will be part of your deal that your attorney helped you make, go there, enjoy it, go with your favorite person. Don't let distance deter you, even if you end up having to pay for it yourself. Every deal is different. But this is a moment in your life to celebrate the fact that you are one of the very few human beings who've actually gotten a film made about your story. When we were on the set of Hysteria, the co-writers were there all the time. They acted so well that everybody wanted them there. Nobody ever asked them to step away. And of course, at the premiere, they were, they got dressed up and looked like gods, and they were thrilled with how their film had turned out. And we were thrilled that they were there and were happy with their film. So all the way through, of what I'm telling you, these are just guidelines. Remember, whether the storyteller is a famous director like Hitchcock or a famous producer like Disney, everyone follows the same kind of operating principles. And I say this repeatedly because I know writers, we all react negatively to the word rule and say, wait a minute, I'm an artist, I don't follow rules. That's why these are not rules. These are simply observations about what makes successful commercial storytelling in Hollywood movies. And we're going to be looking forward to telling you in great detail how all these different subjects actually play out in the process of getting your story from where it is today to the big screen.
So thank you, Ken. As always, I learned so much from listening to you teach on this subject. And what I want to put out to everyone listening is, after having gone through that wonderful presentation, did we deliver on the promise that we set out in the beginning? And if we have, and I believe that we have, I think we've done that in spades. And if you agree with that, I want to introduce you to our training, the Real Fast Hollywood Deal training. And before we actually get into that, however, I just wanted to kind of let you know once again that what I'm about to present to you here in Real Fast Hollywood Deal is a culmination of the strategies that Ken has used to consistently have just one success after the other in selling books and stories to both film and television. And I'd like you, Ken, to talk about this particular one, the Kennedy Detail. Tell folks a little bit about this. I know it was nominated for an Emmy, but just kind of give us a little background on the Kennedy Detail.
Well, the Kennedy Detail began with Jerry Blaine, who was one of JFK's Secret Service men. And he wanted to write the story and we put him together with Lisa McCubbin, who was one of our most promising clients at the time, and they wrote a brilliant book that was a New York Times bestseller for many weeks. And during the process of it, them going around the country on a nationwide tour, we ran into all kinds of interest in making it into a movie, and we made a deal with Discovery to make it into a documentary, and that was nominated for an Emmy, so we all showed up at the Emmy ceremonies in New York to celebrate that nomination. And we're now actually developing the same book into a dramatic film, not a documentary film, but actually one with actors, and we're extremely excited about the progress of all of that.
That's excellent, and you know, this is just one of many stories, and we'll talk more about them that essentially got baked into the Real Fast Hollywood Deal training that we've put together in association with Story Merchant, who is or which is Ken's company that essentially does this, helps folks just like you to get their stories sold to Hollywood or to the entertainment industry. And before I actually get into talking about how you can continue your education with Real Fast Hollywood Deal, I want to just throw out this disclaimer to make sure that, again, you and I are on the same page. Number one, of course, we can't guarantee your success or that you'll sell your story or that it will be made into a movie or a show or that you'll even make nickel one. Okay, as a matter of fact, beware of anyone making any guarantees when it comes to dealing with Hollywood. However, what we can say is that by becoming a student of Real Fast Hollywood Deal, that you are going to drastically increase your chances of success if you follow the training. Your story is good, and of course, it helps to be a little lucky if at all possible. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're seeing eye to eye before I tell you how to get involved with this. So first thing I wanted to kind of tell you in what you get as a student of Real Fast Hollywood Deal is most importantly, or one of the most important aspects of it, is a written, or how to go about crafting a written sales pitch so that your story makes it virtually impossible for someone to say no to at least talking to you further. In other words, making sure that you are prepared before actually taking your story to the marketplace, so that you're not swinging blindly. You know what it takes, and you've done your level best to bring your story up to the standards of what it takes to actually sell. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about here is why, if you're an author, okay, that you are in a very good place. You are, in fact, at the right place at the right time, because Hollywood absolutely loves books, and the elements your story needs to exhibit before you try to sell it. So this is a very important aspect of the training. I think it's one of the most important aspects of it, to actually identify if you have a story that as it sits, that maybe in a novel form, maybe it's a nonfiction memoir or something along those lines, but how it sits essentially right now, how to identify whether it has any chance of going forward, whether it has any chances of actually selling. So of course we're going to cover that in the training. Also, we're going to talk about the typical Hollywood book deal and how it's structured so that you can adjust your expectations beforehand. You know, it's a lot like anything in life. If you know what to expect, or what's potential. What's a potential out there, it's a lot easier to make headway and to not be disappointed, okay, because something doesn't meet your expectations. So that's a big part of this training as well. The other thing is we're going to show you how to learn how you could move toward a maximum payday for your book, so that even if you have a rejection, you don't let that first rejection from the Hollywood marketplace actually deter you from ultimately having a very large payday. So of course that's a big part of what we teach within Real Fast Hollywood Deal as well. Also, we show folks how to get your story in front of the right people, okay, the decision makers who could actually make your story into a movie. And of course, this is a super important thing if you came to play, if you're serious about this. And again, that's we cover that thoroughly within Real Fast Hollywood Deal. The other thing we show you how to do is from story editors to basically story departments. We're going to show you how the story acquisition process actually works. Okay, it can frankly seem counterintuitive to you. All right, at least it did to me. So you will see that that there is a process, and of course, because you know the process, you'll know how to essentially get your foot in the door and get your best foot forward in getting your story actually sold. And then also, we're going to show you, whether it's a good idea or not to actually take your story and write your screenplay yourself, because there's lots of pros and cons of authors actually becoming screenwriters of their own work. So we're going to explore that in this training. You may or may not wish to be the screenwriter of your story. So we're also going to show you how to, and this is a very important point, super important. In fact, I would argue this is one of the biggest points of the Real Fast Hollywood Deal training is how to redo your next or current story at the drawing board to make it instantly more saleable. And one of the cool things that you need to understand is that even if your story as it sits today, either in your head or on the page or in your book, right, even if it has flaws, we're going to actually take you through and show you how to correct those flaws, how to actually buttress your story so that it can be more saleable. Okay, so you're probably asking yourself at this point, well, Daniel, this all sounds great. I definitely want to get involved, but what is the investment? Well, lucky for you, we have made this very reasonable in cost. In fact, for the level of training that you get here, it's really kind of a don't even have to think of it no-brainer deal if, as I say, you're serious. And that is for only $497. And this, frankly, is a ground floor opportunity. We do have we do have plans to increase the price of the training. So if this is something that you are interested in, then go ahead and grab it now at this price. And you'll probably see an add to cart button right directly below where you are now watching. And if you don't, you can go to realfasthollywooddeal.com/go to grab this deal. And we are very confident in the level of training that we've put together here for you. So we do have a 30-day money-back guarantee. You must absolutely love what we've put together for you. You must be delighted with this investment in yourself, because that's frankly what it is. But if you're not, okay, for any reason or no reason at all, as long as you let us know within 30 days, we will give you a cheerful, no hassles refund of your money, okay? And again, the place to go to grab this is right below. You'll see there's an add to cart button, or head over to realfasthollywooddeal.com/go. And again, I wanted to remind you that Ken is no flash in the pan. He definitely knows what he's talking about, and has had massive success in dealing with this, in selling stories to the Hollywood marketplace. And Ken, if I could have you come back on, I'd love for you to chat about the story of Meg and its writer.
Well, Meg is one of our first big deals that we made years and years ago. it was a story about a Jurassic shark 70 feet long that comes out of the Mindanao Trench and terrorizes the Pacific. And we ended up selling it to Doubleday in a 2-book deal for millions of dollars, and then to Disney first, and they kept it for 3 years and dropped it, and then to New Line a few years later, and they did the same. But finally, it is today in pre-production at Warner Brothers and being, about to go into principal photography in New Zealand. And Steve has gone on to write 8 more novels and make many other deals, and to have a very successful career. So we're very happy for him and for this project going forward.
Yeah, which is one of the other things that I wanted to highlight so that you can sort of compare and contrast the tuition in Real Fast Hollywood Deal with what you would have to pay to actually learn screenwriting in a more academic setting. And I actually went and found this survey in the Hollywood Reporter, and even if you're a California resident, okay, for just 1 year at the University of California, Los Angeles, you're going to end up paying almost $13,000 a year, okay, for, again, just learning how to write a screenplay and learning this business that you could essentially get to plug into for much, much less money with this Real Fast Hollywood Deal course that Ken and I have put together. Again, this is available to you at realfasthollywooddeal.com/go. And Ken, I'd like to bring you back on to chat about the Last Valentine. This is a kind of an interesting story that actually did make it into a movie and then back into a book. So tell us about this.
Well, this is the scenario that every writer wants. Jim Pratt came to me with a self-published book, and we worked on it with him and turned it into a book that we sold at auction in New York and ended up being a New York Times bestseller, The Last Valentine. And we tried to get it made, and years went by, about 10 years, until finally we set it up with Hallmark Hall of Fame. And at breakfast with the chief executive of Hallmark in Kansas City at the Alameda Plaza one day, he said, "Ken, I want to warn you before we even start talking that Hallmark, this company, will never make a movie called The Last Valentine. So we're changing the title for obvious reasons. Hallmark making all of their money from Valentine cards." And I tried to talk him out of it, but of course I was up against corporate America. And one of the funny things that happened after Betty White did a fabulous job starring in it, along with Jennifer Love Hewitt, is that when the St. Martin's Press reissued the book to go with the movie, they changed the title to The Lost Valentine 2, which is, to me, one of the funniest little footnotes to history that I've run across in my crazy 25, 30-year career in this business.
I know, and that's just, it's just awesome. And again, the reason why I wanted Ken to tell the story is to just illustrate that it can be done. This can be done. Like Ken said, that book started out as a self-published book. So again, think about that. And then the other thing I wanted to also highlight here is the fact that you will have access to ask questions in your specific circumstance. We do have a members-only Facebook group. You do have it is a members-only group. Only students get in. But you do have access to Ken and I and large and growing community of storytellers that want to sell their stories to Hollywood. So you do get access to Ken and I in that environment. Also, I wanted to tell you about bonus number 2 here, which is the Quick Start Story Merchant Hollywood Jargon Guide. And it's so important that when you are sort of in that arena, in that environment, that you know the words that are, the terminology being used so that you can, know what's going on and not be confused and not make decisions on words and jargon that you don't know. So we include that as well in bonus number 2. And then in bonus number 3, we have a PDF edition of Ken's book, Sell Your Story to Hollywood. And again, all of these bonuses are available to students within realfasthollywooddeal.com/go. Or if you're on the page, likely you will see an add to cart button right below where you are now watching. So head on over there and grab that right now. The other thing I wanted to highlight is yet another one of Ken's many successful author clients. And can you tell folks about Royce's journey here with The Demon Keeper?
Yeah, Royce is a talented young screenwriter originally when I first met him, whose screenplay had just placed in the Nichols Awards, which is the most prestigious screenplay contest. And I tried to sell it in Hollywood and could get absolutely no one to buy it. It was too original, it was too much fun, and it wasn't based on a pre-existing comic book or anything that they could point to as a reason for buying it. So I talked Royce into writing it as a novel, and he did write it as a novel, a very good novel, which we sold to Putnam. And once we sold to Putnam, a few weeks later, we sold it on auction to 20th Century Fox. So it went from script to book and then back to script because they also bought Royce's script to start with in developing the movie. So I love that story because it shows that the market I deal with is the story market. I call myself a story merchant because I'm not about screenplays and novels. I'm about stories. I want to hear your story, and my challenge when I hear your story is to figure out what are all the ways we can get this story told so you can maximize your profit from the biggest audience that you can possibly reach.
Absolutely, and then I've got a couple. I think we have 3 or 4 more that I wanted to highlight here as well. I know during today's presentation we talked about Angels in the Snow, and for that matter, Dennis Walsh's book. Can you chat about sort of the history of these and maybe some of the lessons?
Well, the lesson from Angels in the Snow is persistence, because this is the one that took 20 years to get to the screen. The author, Rexanne, couldn't even believe it when she got the call from her wonderful agent that we were getting a green light on it. And it was incredible feeling to stand on the set the first day of that movie and know what it went through to get to be this movie, to get to actually be making a movie with it. And Dennis is the attorney who actually went underground in the San Fernando Valley into the sordid world of pornography and drugs to track down and bring to justice the killers of his baby brother. It's just a harrowing story, and it begged to be a film, so we wrote the novel very dramatically all the way through. Not the novel, but the nonfiction account of it that he wrote. Nobody Walks Bringing My Brother's Killers to Justice, and sold it, and then once it was sold, began working on the film deal, partnered with Mark Platt, who wrote produced Legally Blonde and Into the Woods, etc. And we are now in a studio deal to bring Dennis's story to the big screen.
And I would also note that is a great log line, that nobody walks, bringing my brother's killers to justice. That's a really cool log line.
Yeah, it's a perfect log line, and people just immediately saw it, and I started getting calls.
Lovely. And what about John Scott Shepherd's book?
Well, John and I had sold a number of his scripts before he came up with the idea of Henry's List of Wrongs, and one of them, in fact, was Joe Somebody, and another was Life or Something Like It. And when he gave me the idea of Henry's List of Wrongs, I was getting on a plane to New York, and I thought it was a great idea, and I was so excited about it that when I landed in New York, I went to the Oak Room at the Plaza and had a drink with one of my favorite editors and told her the story, and she said, "That is the best idea for a novel I've ever heard." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, for sure, I'll send it to you when it's done." So I went back to my apartment in New York and called John, and I said, "Forget about a screenplay, you're going to write it as a novel." So he did write it as a novel, and we ended up selling it at auction as a screen. We sold the story, the novel, to New Line for, I think it was $1.2 million, with 4 or 5 studios bidding on it. And Mark Platt has also bought a book from me by Clint Hill, who was Jackie Kennedy's secret agent, along with Lisa McCubbins of the Kennedy Detail, called Mrs. Kennedy and Me, which is an intimate and wonderful story of his, eccentric and unique relationship with Jackie Kennedy as her bodyguard, and caught between her and a president who had a lot of agendas going on. It's just a wonderful book, and love to see it become a movie, so we'll keep working on it as long as we possibly can keep working on it.
Well, great. All right. So I wanted to kind of take just a few minutes to sort of highlight just some of the many, many success stories that have come. So that's one of the reasons why that if you are really interested in and serious about your success in selling your story to Hollywood, that I strongly urge you to head on over to realfasthollywooddeal.com/go, or probably right below where you are now watching, there's an add to cart button. And before you actually do that, you might have a few questions, and I wanted to sort of address those questions. We have a FAQ for you, and let's sort of chat about that. The first one is, will the investment in this training always stay the same? And the answer is no. As a matter of fact, and I've said this earlier, that we have plans to be increasing the investment in this training, the tuition in this training, as time goes by, because that's usually what we do as we more fully develop the a course and add to it and make it better and better, which is usually what we do. So if you see it at a $497 price point and you have decided to go ahead and take the training, my strong suggestion is that you go ahead and click that add to cart button right now to lock in today's price. Okay. So that's the answer to that question. The other question that we always get is, what's the class schedule? And the answer is that this is a at your own pace training. Okay, you could start and stop when you have time to go through the training. All right, so fear not about that. Another one we get all the time is, how long will I have access to the training? Well, we're planning indefinite access. It certainly doesn't end in 6 months or a year or anything like that. So essentially, you could do this whenever it fits your schedule. Okay. Then another question that we get is, does this training include access to Dr. Atchity? And the answer, as I said earlier in bonus number 1, is yes. Enrolling, you will have immediate access to our exclusive, that is members only. I do check that. Okay, only let members in, only paid people. But you do have access to our Facebook group where Dr. Atchity can answer your specific questions. Okay, now, one other question that we get for those that are really hot to trot, they're really serious about getting their stories sold, is can we submit our stories or get help developing them for Hollywood directly from Dr. Atchity? And the answer is yes, because we've had so much call for this, and truly is by popular demand. We have developed a very special service available only to students of this training, and we've got what we're calling a coverage, or that's actually what it's called in the industry. So Ken, can you tell folks what a coverage is and why it's so crucial to success in Hollywood?
Well, if you'll recall, I talked about a coverage as the product of the story department. A story editor reads your story and creates a coverage, which is a report on your story. It breaks into about 10 different areas, starting with a pass, recommend with development, or recommend, with the question, keep an eye on the writer, yes or no, etc. And it's crucial to your success because when the executive gets the coverages back every day, he may get 5 to 10 every day, he looks at the coverage and almost always immediately decides on passing. Once in a while, when there's one that says recommend or recommend with development, he will go to the next stage of actually contacting the writer, that's you, and beginning a dialogue. So it's crucial to your success beyond your belief. I mean, the industry is run by these coverages, unfortunately. And the most unfortunate part about it of all as a writer, and I've spent my entire career working with writers to try to give them an edge by learning more, the most unfortunate part is that you never get to see the coverage. So that's why we've come up with a situation where you will get to see a coverage.
All right, so what we've decided to do is actually, for those of you that really want to hit the ground running, you really want to dive in very, very fast, and you're also confident that your story already has what it takes based on what's in the training. Also, and you want Ken to personally review your story, we've put together this course plus a coverage bundle offer, which is $1,297, and this is really $450 off what you would pay from Ken's site to get the same thing. So if this is something that you want to do, if you're really really serious about getting this level of help, you want a little bit more hand-holding, a little higher touch, then I strongly recommend that you grab this special course plus coverage bundled offer at only $1,297. And the place to go to grab it is at realfasthollywooddeal.com/go, or right below where you are now watching. So there's two options right below where you are now watching, or at Real Fast Hollywood Deal. You can grab either the course at $497 or the course plus this coverage bundle for those of you, and honestly, it's probably not right for most of you, probably not for you, but for some people that know that they need this extra help and they want this extra help, this is a perfect and very affordable way to get that extra help and get a coverage for your story as well. So if this is something that you want to do, I strongly recommend that you make the decision, either get the course or the course plus coverage bundle right now, because they are both planning. We've actually have plans to go up on the prices of both of those. So go ahead and grab them right now. And Ken, back over to you for concluding remarks.
Well, I think that I hope we haven't exhausted everybody by running through all this very quickly, but we're excited about this. I mean, I personally am excited because for years I have been frustrated by talking to individual writers who have asked me about every single element that we put into this training, and I simply don't have enough hours in the day. When I was a professor, I had office hours and people could come and ask their questions and so on. They weren't often enough either, but we finally figured out a way to kind of bring the professor out of the classroom and back into reality by creating a training where I pre-answer, I hope, most of your questions, and also with a mechanism, that Facebook page, which is Daniel's brilliant idea, to let you ask specific questions. And I'm very excited about it because our whole goal is to be helpful, and one thing that we're looking forward to is your feedback on what you'd like to know that we didn't cover, or what could be different, how can we improve it, because we're constantly improving this training and plan to do some others in the future, all around helping you succeed and getting your stories to the world. So my advice to you is learn all you can, but don't give up. If you're a storyteller, you have a story to tell. Only you can tell that story. If you don't tell it, then the world will never have it, and I think that is a true crime that you should never be accused of committing.
Excellent. So go now, click either the course or the course plus coverage bundle by grabbing one of those add to cart buttons right below where you're now watching, or at realfasthollywooddeal.com. Go now.